The champagne flute didn't tremble in her hand, even though she knew it held enough cyanide to kill a bull elephant. Sophia Russo wasn't just a waitress. She was a ghost in an apron, invisible to the men who ruled New York from the shadows. Dominic Moretti, the capo of the Gambino remnant faction, sat 10 feet away, laughing with the man who had just paid for his death. Time seemed to warp. If she walked away, she lived, and he died. If she switched the glass, she signed her own death warrant. Sophia took a breath, adjusted her tray, and walked straight into the lion's mouth. The air inside Ristorante da Vinci on Manhattan's Upper East Side always smelled the same: expensive truffles, aged Barolo, and fear. To the untrained eye, the fear was invisible, hidden beneath the clinking of crystal and the low hum of politicians and hedge fund managers brokering deals. But Sophia Russo knew the smell. She had grown up with it in Bensonhurst before her father, a small-time associate for the Lucchese family, had disappeared into the foundations of the Verrazzano Narrows Bridge. She tightened her ponytail, smoothing the black apron over her waist. Tonight was different. The air was heavier. "Table 4 needs a refill on the 82 Brunello," whispered Marco, the maitre d', his face pale and sweating despite the aggressive air conditioning. "And Sophia, for the love of God, don't look them in the eye." Sophia didn't need the warning. Table 4 was the only table that mattered tonight. It was occupied by Dominic Moretti, known on the streets as the Architect. At 34, he was the youngest boss to ever hold significant territory in the Five family's modern history. He didn't look like the old dons with their cigars and wheezing breaths. Dominic was sharp, tailored in a midnight blue Tom Ford suit that cost more than Sophia's entire life earnings. He had eyes like shattered obsidian, dark, reflective, and utterly unreadable. Sitting opposite him was Salvatore "Sal" Conte, his underboss. Sal was older, louder, with a smile that showed too many teeth. He was a man who laughed at his own jokes and checked his watch too often. Sophia picked up the silver tray. Her hands were steady. They had to be. As she approached the table, the conversation died instantly. It was a practiced silence, the kind that happens when an outsider enters the circle of trust. Dominic Moretti leaned back, his gaze lazily drifting over her. It wasn't sexual, it was an assessment. He was calculating threats, even from a waitress. "More wine, gentlemen?" Sophia asked, her voice flat, professional. "Please, Bella," Sal said, grinning, "and bring a fresh glass for me. This one has a smudge." He pushed his glass toward her. It was a subtle movement, but Sophia saw the sleight of hand. As Sal moved his empty glass, his other hand brushed over Dominic's half-full glass of champagne. It was a magician's trick, a distraction. But Sophia had spent 3 years watching card sharps and hustlers in her uncle's underground poker rooms. She saw the tiny, dissolvable pill slip from Sal's cuff and vanish into the golden bubbles of Dominic's drink. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. Cyanide, or perhaps ricin. Whatever it was fast. Sal was making a move. The coup was happening right now, between the appetizer and the main course. Sophia poured the red wine into Sal's fresh glass. Her mind raced. If she stayed silent, Dominic Moretti would be dead in 5 minutes. Sal would take over, and the power struggle would likely turn the streets of New York into a war zone. If she spoke up, Sal would shoot her where she stood. She looked at Dominic. He was watching Sal, a faint, bored expression on his face. He didn't know. The most dangerous man in the city, the man they said had eyes in the back of his head, was about to be put down like a sick dog by his closest friend. Sophia felt a strange, cold clarity wash over her. She didn't owe Dominic Moretti a thing, but she hated a rat, and she hated Sal Conte, a man she knew had authorized the loan shark beatings in her old neighborhood. She finished pouring. "Is there anything else, Mr. Moretti?" she asked, turning her body slightly to block Sal's view of the table for a fraction of a second. Dominic looked up at her. For a second, their eyes locked. He saw something there. Fear? Warning? He frowned slightly. "No," Dominic said, his voice a low rumble. That will be all." Sophia bowed her head. As she turned, she made her move. It was clumsy, a calculated accident. She let her hip check the edge of the table, causing the silverware to rattle. "Oh, I apologize," she gasped, reaching out to steady the glasses. In the chaos of her clumsiness, her hand swept over the table. With a dexterity she hadn't used since she was a teenage pickpocket, she palmed Dominic's champagne flute and replaced it with the empty water glass from the adjacent setting, then instantly swapped the poisoned champagne flute with Sal's water glass. It happened in less than 2 seconds. "Watch it!" Sal snapped, his hand flying to his jacket, undoubtedly reaching for a weapon. "I'm so sorry, sir," Sophia stammered, backing away, clutching the tray to her chest. Dominic raised a hand, stopping Sal. "Relax, Sal. She's just a girl. Let it go." Sophia retreated to the shadows of the service station, her heart rate spiking to 160. She watched. Dominic reached for his drink, but he paused. He didn't pick up the champagne. He picked up the water glass she had placed there. He looked at it. Then he looked at the champagne flute sitting innocently near Sal's hand, the flute that was originally his. Dominic Moretti was not a fool. He had noticed the switch. He slowly turned his head, his dark eyes finding Sophia across the room. She stood frozen, holding a pitcher of water like a shield. He didn't look angry. He looked intrigued. Then Dominic smiled, a cold, terrifying smile directed at his underboss. "Sal," Dominic said, his voice carrying clearly across the quiet room. "To loyalty." He raised his water glass. Sal, sweating now, laughed nervously. He didn't realize the glasses had been shuffled in the fumble. He reached for the champagne flute, the one he had poisoned, the one Sophia had slid toward him. "To loyalty, Dom," Sal said. Sal Conti drank. The silence in the restaurant was absolute, though only 3 people knew the weight of it. Sophia gripped the mahogany service station counter so hard her knuckles turned white. She watched Sal Conti swallow the liquid that was meant to kill his boss. 1 second, 2 seconds. "Good vintage," Sal muttered, placing the glass down. He adjusted his tie, looking toward the door, probably waiting for his hit squad to rush in once Dominic started choking. Dominic leaned forward, resting his elbows on the white tablecloth. "You know, Sal," he began conversationally, "I was reading about Roman history this morning. The Emperor Claudius." "You know how he died?" Sal frowned, a bead of sweat trickling down his temple. "History. Since when do you read history, Dom? We got business to discuss. The shipment from Jersey." "Poisoned mushrooms," Dominic continued, ignoring him. "Fed to him by his wife, the person he trusted most. It's funny how betrayal always comes from the ones who sit at your table." Sal's face twitched. He was starting to feel it. He coughed, a wet, rattling sound. He tugged at his collar. "Is it hot in here? Marco, turn up the AC." Dominic didn't blink. "It's not the heat, Sal." Sal stood up, his chair scraping violently against the floor. He clutched his chest, his eyes widening in sudden, horrific realization. He looked at the champagne glass, then at Dominic, and finally, his gaze darted to the waitress standing in the shadows. "You," Sal wheezed, pointing a shaking finger at Dominic. "You knew." "I didn't," Dominic said softly, picking up the water glass Sophia had given him. He swirled the liquid. "But you did!" Sal gasped, foam beginning to form at the corners of his mouth. He reached into his jacket, pulling out a snub-nosed revolver. The restaurant erupted into screams. Patrons dove under tables. Sophia didn't move. She couldn't. She was staring down the barrel of a dying man's gun. Bang! The shot went wild, shattering a mirror behind the bar. Sal collapsed, convulsing, his body rejecting the poison destroying his nervous system. Dominic Moretti stood up. He didn't look at his dying friend. He walked straight toward Sophia. The room was chaos. Security guards were rushing in from the front, guns drawn, confused about who the target was. Dominic reached Sophia before anyone else did. He looked massive up close, smelling of gunpowder and expensive cologne. You have a name? He asked, his voice calm amidst the screaming. Sophia, she whispered. Sophia, he tested the name. You just killed a made man of the Gambino family. I saved your life, she countered, her voice trembling but defiant. Dominic's eyes narrowed. Same thing, but his crew is outside, and they aren't going to care that he started it. They're going to see him dead and me standing. He glanced at the front door where 3 thick-necked men in leather jackets were pushing past the maitre d'. And they saw you make the switch. Sophia felt the blood drain from her face. She hadn't thought that far ahead. They're coming, Dominic said. He grabbed her hand. His grip was iron. If you stay here, you're dead. If you come with me, you might live through the night. Sophia looked at the men barging in. She recognized one, Vinny the Ox Rossi. He was Sal's cousin. He had a reputation for using a tire iron first and asking questions never. Go, she said. Not without you. Dominic pulled her, not waiting for an answer. He dragged her through the kitchen doors, startling the chefs. Back exit, he barked. They burst into the alleyway. The humid New York night hit them. A black SUV was idling there, Dominic's personal transport. His driver, a hulking man named Dante, looked surprised to see the waitress. Boss? Drive, Dante. We're burned. Dominic shoved Sophia into the back seat and dove in after her. As the door slammed shut, bullets sparked against the armored plating of the SUV. Vinny and his crew had breached the kitchen. Go! Go! Dominic roared. The SUV screeched out of the alley, clipping a dumpster and tearing onto 3rd Avenue. Sophia was thrown against the leather door panel. She watched the restaurant disappear in the rear-view mirror, flashing red and blue lights already reflecting off the storefronts. She was hyperventilating. I'm a waitress, she said, her voice cracking. I serve pasta. I don't do this. Dominic adjusted his cuffs, seemingly unbothered by the assassination attempt or the high-speed chase. He looked at her, and for the first time, the mask slipped. There was adrenaline in his eyes, a wild energy. You're not a waitress anymore, Sophia, Dominic said, reaching into the minibar console and pulling out a bottle of water. He cracked the seal and handed it to her. You just became the most valuable asset in New York City, and the biggest target. He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. Sal Conte was backed by the Russians, which means this wasn't just a coup. It's a war, and you just fired the first shot. Sophia took the water, her hands shaking so hard she spilled it on her apron. Where are we going? Dominic looked out the window at the blurring city lights. The only place safe enough to hide a woman who just outsmarted a consigliere. We're going to the vault. The vault wasn't a bank. It was a brutalist concrete fortress perched on the cliffs of the Palisades, overlooking the Hudson River. From the outside, it looked like an abandoned mid-century modern ruin. Inside, it was a fortress of steel, bulletproof glass, and minimalist Italian luxury. Dante drove the SUV into the underground garage, the heavy steel shutters grinding closed behind them, sealing them off from the world. The silence that followed the roar of the engine was deafening. Check the perimeter sensors, Dominic ordered Dante as he stepped out of the car. He didn't wait for a response. He walked around to the passenger side and yanked the door open. Sophia was huddled in the corner, her arms wrapped around herself. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by the shivering shock of reality. Out, Dominic said. It wasn't a request. Sophia stepped onto the polished concrete floor. Her legs felt like jelly. I need to call my mum, she said, her voice sounding small in the vast garage. She waits up for me. If I'm not home by 2... Dominic laughed, a short, humorless bark. Sophia, you don't exist anymore. Your phone. Toss it. He held out his hand. No, she clutched her apron pocket. It has pictures of my dad. It's all I have. Dominic stepped closer, looming over her. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The men chasing us can track a signal to within 3 meters in 30 seconds. Do you want them to find your mother? Because that's what happens next. They find you. They torture you. Then they go to your house and burn it down with everyone inside, just to send a message." Sophia stared at him, tears welling in her eyes. The reality of his words hit her like a physical blow. With a shaking hand, she pulled out her cracked iPhone and handed it to him. Dominic dropped it onto the concrete and crushed it under the heel of his dress shoe. The crunch echoed. "Upstairs," he commanded. They took a private elevator to the main living area. It was a sprawling space with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the dark river. The furniture was leather and chrome, cold and masculine. There were no personal touches, no photos, no plants, no warmth. It was the home of a man who expected to leave at a moment's notice. Dominic went straight to a wet bar and poured 2 tumblers of amber liquid. He downed one in a single swallow and carried the other to Sophia, who was standing awkwardly by a white leather sofa. "Drink," he said. "It's whiskey. It'll help the shakes." Sophia took the glass but didn't drink. "Why did you save me?" she asked. "You could have left me there. Vinnie Rossi wouldn't have killed me immediately. I'm a witness, sure, but—" "Vinnie Rossi cuts the tongues out of snitches," Dominic said, unbuttoning his suit jacket and tossing it onto a chair. He revealed a leather shoulder holster, carrying a custom Beretta. He sat down, looking exhausted. "And you didn't just witness a crime. You interfered in family business. You humiliated a capo by saving his enemy. To them, you're not a waitress. You're a player," he studied her, his eyes narrowing. "Which brings me to my question. Who taught you the switch? That wasn't luck. You palmed that glass like a pro." Sophia took a sip of the whiskey. It burned her throat, grounding her. "My father was Antonio Russo. They called him Tony the Baker." Dominic froze. He set his glass down slowly. "Tony the Baker, Lucchese associate. Ran numbers in Bensonhurst back in the 90s. "He didn't just run numbers," Sophia said, her chin lifting slightly. "He was a mechanic. He fixed problems, until he became one." Dominic nodded slowly. "I remember. He vanished in 08. They said he stole from the pot." "He didn't steal," Sophia said bitterly. "He refused to kill a kid. So they erased him." A silence stretched between them. The connection hung in the air. They were both children of the life, just on different sides of the gun. "So you hate us," Dominic deduced. "You hate the life, yet you saved a boss." "I hate rats," Sophia corrected. "And I hate poison. It's a coward's weapon. If you're going to kill a man, look him in the eye." Dominic stood up and walked toward her. The air in the room shifted. It became charged, electric. He stopped inches from her. She could smell the scent of expensive tobacco and the metallic tang of danger that seemed to cling to his skin. He reached out, his fingers brushing a stray lock of hair from her cheek. His touch was surprisingly gentle, a stark contrast to the violence of the night. "You have fire, Sophia Russo," he murmured. "Most people would be hyperventilating in the bathroom right now. You're standing here debating ethics with the capo dei capi." Sophia's breath hitched. His eyes were mesmerizing. Deep, dark pools that seemed to pull her in. "What happens now?" she whispered. "Now," Dominic said, stepping back and breaking the spell. "We wait. Dante is scrubbing your apartment. We'll make it look like you packed a bag and skipped town, a runaway. It buys us time." "Time for what?" "Time to find out who gave Sal the order," Dominic said, his face hardening into stone. "Sal was ambitious, but he was stupid. He wouldn't have moved against me unless he had backing. Heavy backing." Suddenly the elevator chimed. Sophia jumped, spilling whiskey on the expensive rug. Dominic had his gun in his hand before the chime ended, aiming it at the steel doors. The doors slid open. A woman stepped out. She was in her 50s, elegant, wearing a silk robe and holding a medical bag. She looked at the gun, then at Dominic, with zero fear. "Put that away, Nico," she scolded, using a childhood nickname. "Dante told me you brought a stray." Dominic lowered the weapon. "Maria, I didn't call you." "Dante did," the woman said, walking briskly into the room. She was the family doctor, a woman who had stitched up more bullet holes than the local ER. She looked at Sophia. He said she was in shock. She looks fine. Pale, but fine. Maria approached Sophia, checking her pupils and pulse with efficient, cold hands. Heart rate is elevated. You're running on cortisol, honey. When you crash, you're going to crash hard. She stays in the guest wing, Dominic ordered. Lock the door from the outside. No one in or out. Sophia bristled. I'm a prisoner? Dominic paused at the door to his study. He looked back at her, and for a moment, Sophia saw the weight of the crown he wore, the exhaustion, the paranoia. You're alive, Dominic said. In my world, that's the only luxury that matters. Don't make me regret bringing you here. He slammed the door shut. Sophia didn't sleep. The guest room was more luxurious than any hotel she'd ever seen. Egyptian cotton sheets, a marble bathroom larger than her entire apartment. But the door was locked. She was a bird in a gilded cage. She spent the night pacing, watching the sun rise over the Hudson. Her mind replayed the restaurant scene on a loop. The switch, Sal's face, the gun, Dominic's hand pulling her to safety. Dominic, he was a monster. She knew that. He was the head of a criminal empire that thrived on extortion and violence. But he was also complicated. There was a code he lived by, and he had saved her when he could have used her as a human shield. Around 8 a.m., the lock clicked. Sophia tensed, grabbing a heavy brass lamp from the bedside table. The door opened, and Dominic entered. He was showered, shaved, and wearing a fresh grey suit, looking like he was heading to a board meeting rather than a war council. He saw the lamp in her hand and smirked. Put it down, killer. Breakfast is served. He moved aside, and a terrified-looking maid wheeled in a cart with espresso, pastries, and fruit. I need to leave, Sophia said, setting the lamp down, but keeping her distance. My boss at the restaurant. The police will be questioning everyone. The restaurant is a crime scene, Dominic said, pouring 2 espressos, and your boss is currently answering questions about why he employed a woman with a fake ID who just robbed the register and fled. Sophia's jaw dropped. What? Dante is thorough, Dominic said, handing her a cup. We planted the evidence this morning. As far as the NYPD is concerned, Sophia Russo is a thief who panicked when a mob hit went down and ran with the cash. It discredits you as a witness and gives you a reason to be missing. You ruined my reputation, she snapped. I worked hard for that job. I saved your life, Dominic roared, his calm facade cracking. He slammed his cup down, coffee splashing onto the saucer. Do you understand what is happening out there? Sal Conte is dead. His brother Marco is currently tearing apart Brooklyn looking for you, and the Russians. He stopped, running a hand through his hair. The Russians? Sophia asked softly. Dominic walked to the window, looking out at the grey morning. Viktor Volkov, he's the head of the Red Bratva in Brighton Beach. We've had a truce for 5 years. But Sal was greedy. We found texts on Sal's burner phone. Volkov promised Sal my territory if he took me out. He turned to face her. Volkov knows you're the one who stopped it. He knows you're with me. He's put a bounty on your head. $500,000. Every hitman, lowlife and desperate junkie in 5 boroughs is looking for a waitress with brown hair and brown eyes. Sophia sank onto the bed. $500,000? You're famous, Dominic said grimly. Suddenly, a siren blared throughout the penthouse, a low, rhythmic, thrumming sound that vibrated in the floor. Red emergency lights began to pulse in the corners of the ceiling. Dominic's face went white. He checked his watch, a complex tactical chronograph. That's the perimeter alarm, he said. His voice deadly calm. Someone breached the outer gate. I thought you said this place was a fortress, Sophia whispered. It is, Dominic said, drawing his gun, which means they didn't break in. Someone let them in. He looked at Sophia, his eyes filled with a sudden, sharp suspicion. Did you make a call? Did you keep a device? No, I swear, Sophia cried. Dominic stared at her for a heartbeat, weighing her soul. Then he nodded. Stay here, lock the door. If anyone but me tries to come in, you go out the window onto the ledge. Do you understand? Dominic, do it!" He spun around and sprinted out of the room. Sophia rushed to the door and locked it. She heard shouting from the main living area. Gunfire erupted, loud, distinct cracks of automatic weapons. It sounded like a war zone. She backed away, her heart hammering against her ribs. She looked at the window. We were 20 stories up. The ledge was maybe a foot wide. Crash! The door to the bedroom shook as someone kicked it. "Open up!" a voice shouted. It wasn't Dominic. It was a thick, heavy accent. Russian. Sophia looked around frantically. No weapon. Just the lamp. The door splintered. A boot kicked through the lock. Sophia didn't wait. She grabbed the handle of the balcony door and threw it open. The wind whipped her hair and dress. She climbed over the railing and stepped onto the narrow concrete ledge that ran along the side of the building. She pressed her back against the cold concrete, shuffling away from the balcony, just as the bedroom door burst open. 2 men in black tactical gear stormed in. They swept the room. "Clear!" one shouted. "She was here," the other said, touching the coffee cup Dominic had left. "Check the balcony." Sophia held her breath, closing her eyes. She was suspended 300 feet above the Hudson River. One slip, and she was dead. She heard heavy boots on the balcony. "Nothing," the man said. "She must have gone with Moretti. Volkov wants her alive. Find her." They retreated into the penthouse. Sophia let out a shuddering breath. She was alive, but she was stuck on a ledge, 20 stories up, while a Russian hit squad hunted the man who was supposed to protect her. She shimmied sideways, inch by inch, toward the corner of the building where the living room windows were. She had to know if Dominic was alive. She peered through the thick glass. The living room was a wreck. Furniture was overturned. Dante was on the floor, bleeding from a shoulder wound, returning fire from behind the kitchen island. And Dominic? Dominic was fighting hand to hand with a giant of a man in the center of the room. The man had a knife. Dominic had lost his gun. It was a brutal, ugly dance. Dominic blocked a slash, delivering a knee to the man's gut, but the Russian was like a tank. He absorbed the blow and slammed Dominic onto the glass coffee table, shattering it. Dominic groaned, stunned. The Russian raised the knife for a killing blow. Sophia didn't think. She saw a heavy terracotta planter on the balcony ledge near the living room window. It held a dead ornamental tree. She couldn't get inside. The window was sealed. But she saw the Russian's back was to the glass. She grabbed the planter. It weighed at least 30 pounds. With a scream of effort, she swung it not at the man, but at the glass window itself. The planter bounced off harmlessly. The glass was bulletproof. Sophia sobbed in frustration. Dominic was struggling to hold the knife arm back, his strength failing. She looked around. There, a maintenance access panel on the wall. A red box labeled Emergency Ventilation Override. She smashed the plastic cover with her elbow, ignoring the pain, and yanked the lever down. Inside the apartment, the halon fire suppression system triggered. Instant chaos. High-pressure gas vented into the room with a deafening hiss, turning the air into a white fog. It was designed to starve a fire of oxygen. It also blinded everyone in the room. The Russian hesitated, coughing, his eyes stinging. That split second was all Dominic needed. He twisted his hips, bucked the man off, and grabbed a shard of the broken glass table. Sophia couldn't see the end. The white fog swallowed them. She waited, clinging to the ledge, as the gunfire stopped. Minutes passed. The ventilation system roared, sucking the gas out. The glass door to the balcony slid open. Dominic stood there. He was covered in blood, some his, mostly not. His shirt was torn, revealing a nasty cut on his chest. He looked like a demon rising from hell. He looked at Sophia, shivering on the ledge. He didn't speak. He reached out a hand, his palm open, blood-stained but steady. "Come back inside, Sophia," he said, his voice raspy. "I think you just saved my life again. The ride from the Palisades back into the city was a blur of pain and asphalt. Dante, despite a bullet grazing his shoulder, drove the battered SUV like a man possessed, weaving through the traffic on the George Washington Bridge. In the back seat, the dynamic had shifted entirely. Dominic Moretti, the untouchable king of New York, was bleeding out on the beige leather, and Sophia Russo, the waitress from Bensonhurst, was the only thing keeping him conscious. "Keep pressure on it," Dante grunted from the front, his eyes darting to the rearview mirror. "We're going to the safe haven in Astoria. It's off the books. Even the saint doesn't know about it." "Oh." Sophia pressed a thick wad of napkins, grabbed from the car's console, against the gash on Dominic's chest. The knife had missed his heart, but sliced deep across the pectoral muscle. The blood was dark and hot, soaking through her fingers. "Stay with me," she commanded, her voice surprisingly steady. She slapped Dominic's cheek lightly when his eyelids fluttered. "You don't get to die. Not after I almost fell 20 stories for you." Dominic let out a ragged laugh that turned into a cough. "You have a hell of an arm, Sophia. That planter. Shut up and breathe," she said, though her heart was breaking against her ribs. They arrived at an unassuming auto repair shop in Queens, nestled under the elevated train tracks. The sign read, "Miller's Mufflers." But when Dante punched a code into a keypad hidden behind a tire stack, the floor of the grease pit hydraulically lowered, revealing a subterranean medical suite. It wasn't a hospital, but it was sterile. Dante collapsed into a chair, letting out a long groan, while Sophia helped Dominic onto a metal examination table. "I need a suture kit, saline, and whiskey," Dominic gritted out, his face grey. "Dante, you patch yourself up. Sophia, you do me." "I'm not a doctor," Sophia panicked, looking at the jagged wound. "I don't trust doctors right now," Dominic growled, gripping the edge of the table until his knuckles popped. "Doctors can be bought. You're the only person in this city I know for a fact isn't trying to kill me." He was right. The logic was cold, but sound. For the next hour, the auto shop turned into an operating theatre. Sophia, guided by Dominic's strained instructions, cleaned the wound. She poured the saline, watched the muscle twitch, and threaded the curved needle. The first stitch was the hardest. Her hands shook. "Look at me," Dominic whispered. She looked up. His eyes were clear, burning with an intensity that made the room feel small. He reached out with his uninjured arm and held her wrist, steadying her. "You are strong, Sophia. Stronger than Sal. Stronger than Volkov. Just so." She did. She stitched him up, 22 sutures in total, while he drank whiskey straight from the bottle and didn't make a sound. When she tied the final knot and taped the gauze over his chest, she felt a wave of exhaustion crash over her. She slumped against the metal cabinets, sliding down to the floor. Dominic sat up slowly, testing the bandages. He looked at her, huddled on the floor, stained with his blood. He stood up, shakily, and walked over to her. He didn't offer a hand. Instead, he slid down the cabinet to sit next to her on the cold tile floor. They sat in silence for a long time, shoulders touching. "Why?" Sophia asked quietly. "Why did the Russians attack? How did they get in?" Dominic took a pull of the whiskey and handed the bottle to her. The security system wasn't bypassed. It was deactivated. From the inside. Sophia took a drink. The burn was welcome. "Who?" "There are only 3 people with those codes. Me, Dante." Dominic paused, his jaw tightening. "And Frankie the Saint Giordano, my consigliere, my father's best friend." "The man you trust with your life," Sophia realized. "The man who raised me after my father died," Dominic corrected, his voice hollow. "Frankie negotiated the truce with Volkov 5 years ago. I thought he was keeping the peace. It turns out he was selling us out by the pound." He turned his head to look at her. In the harsh fluorescent light, stripped of his suit and his armor, he looked human, vulnerable. "I have nothing left, Sophia," he admitted. "My underboss is dead. My consigliere is a traitor. My soldiers are likely being hunted or bought off as we speak. I am a king without a kingdom." Sophia looked at the stitches on his chest. She thought about the cyanide in the glass. She thought about her father, a small cog in a machine that crushed him. "You're not dead," she said firmly. "And as long as the king is alive, the kingdom is just on pause." Dominic stared at her, and the atmosphere shifted. The adrenaline was gone, replaced by a magnetic pull. He reached out, his hand cupping the back of her neck, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw. "You should run," he whispered, leaning in. "Take the cash in the safe here. Go to Oregon. Change your name." "I can't," she whispered back, not pulling away. "I'm the girl who switched the glass. Volkov won't stop looking. And I don't want to run." Dominic closed the distance. He kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It tasted of whiskey, blood, and desperation. It was a seal of a pact forged in violence. Sophia kissed him back, her hands tangling in his hair, grounding herself in the chaos. When they pulled apart, Dominic rested his forehead against hers. "If we stay," he said low, "we go to war, and we're outnumbered 100-1. Sophia pulled back, her eyes flashing with a sudden, dangerous idea. "We don't need numbers, Dominic. You said it yourself. Volkov thinks you're dead. Or running. He thinks he's won. He has." "No." Sophia stood up, wiping the blood from her hands onto her apron. "When men think they've won, they celebrate. And when they celebrate, they get sloppy." She looked down at the Mafia boss. "Where will Volkov go to crow about his victory?" Dominic looked up, seeing the transformation in her. The waitress was gone. "The Onyx Room," Dominic said slowly. "It's neutral ground in Midtown. High security. Private. If Frankie and Volkov are sealing the deal to merge the families, they'll do it there. Tomorrow night." "Can you get a gun inside?" Sophia asked. "Impossible. Metal detectors, pat-downs. It's a fortress." "For a guest, maybe," Sophia said, a cold smile touching her lips, a smile she had learned from him. "But nobody checks the staff." The plan was insanity. Dante, now sporting a sling for his arm, called it a suicide mission. Dominic forbade it 3 times, but Sophia was relentless. "You can't walk in there, Dominic," she argued, pacing the small mechanics office they were using as a war room. "You're 6'2", you have a hole in your chest, and your face is on every mob wanted poster in the tri-state area. Frankie knows your face. He doesn't know mine." "Volkov has a bounty on you," Dominic countered, sharpening a combat knife that looked comically primitive against the high-tech surveillance gear Dante was setting up. "Volkov is looking for a terrified girl in a waitress uniform," Sophia said. "He's not looking for this." She gestured to herself. In the last 6 hours, she had transformed. She had cut her long, dark hair into a sharp, jagged bob and dyed it a harsh platinum blonde with cheap drugstore chemicals. She wore heavy, dark makeup that hardened her soft features. She looked like a bruised, edgy bartender from the Lower East Side, not the sweet girl from Ristorante Da Vinci. "I worked catering for 3 years before Da Vinci's," Sophia pressed. "I know the staffing agency that handles the Onyx Room. They're always short-handed. I made a call. I'm on the shift list as Lexi." Dominic stared at her. He hated it. Every instinct in his body screamed to lock her in a vault and stand guard. But he knew she was right. It was the only way to get close to Volkov and Frankie, the Saint, without starting a war they couldn't win. "1 hour," Dominic said, his voice tight. "You go in. You drop the listening devices in the private suite. You get eyes on Frankie, and then you get out. If you sense even a shiver of trouble, you walk." "I know the drill," she said. He grabbed her by the shoulders. "Sophia, if they find you, I can't save you in there. The Onyx Room is a bunker. I don't need saving," she lied. "I just need you to be ready when I flush them out." The Onyx Room was a subterranean palace of black marble and gold velvet. It vibrated with deep house music and the hum of illicit billions changing hands. Sophia, now Lexi, moved through the crowd with a tray of crystal tumblers, invisible in plain sight. She wore a headset earpiece hidden by her hair. "Check in," Dominic's voice buzzed in her ear. He was in the van parked 3 blocks away, watching the thermal feeds Dante had hacked. "I'm in the main lounge," Sophia murmured, pretending to adjust her collar, moving to the VIP sector. "Be careful," Dominic's voice was strained. "Frankie just arrived. He's with 6 bodyguards." Sophia's heart hammered, but her hands were steady. She navigated the sea of bodies, her eyes scanning. She saw them. In the elevated VIP booth, behind a velvet rope and 2 massive bouncers, sat the architects of her nightmare. Viktor Volkov was a bear of a man, laughing loudly, a cigar clamped in his teeth. And sitting opposite him, looking pious and regretful, was Frankie Giordano, the man who had sold out his own son. Sophia felt a surge of pure, white-hot rage. She approached the bouncers. "Drinks for Mr. Giordano," she said, her voice raspy and bored. The bouncer looked her up and down. He checked the tray. Unopened bottles, sealed ice bucket. No weapons. "Go ahead," he grunted, lifting the rope. Sophia stepped into the lion's den. The noise of the club faded slightly in the acoustic privacy of the booth. Dominic was a problem, Frankie was saying, his voice smooth like oil. "Too much honor, not enough business sense. The city needs stability, Victor. It needs us." "And the girl?" Volkov asked, pouring vodka. "The one who switched the glass?" "Dead," Frankie lied. "My men found her body in the river this morning. Moretti is bleeding out in a gutter somewhere. It's over." Sophia set the tray down on the table. She was 3 feet away from the men who wanted her dead. "Compliments of the house," she mumbled, keeping her head down. As she placed the ice bucket, she deftly stuck a small black disc, a high-gain transmitter, under the lip of the table. "Wait," Volkov said. Sophia froze. Volkov reached out and grabbed her wrist. His grip was bruising. He pulled her closer, his eyes, pale blue and cold, scanning her face. "You have nice hands," Volkov slurred slightly. "Too nice for a busboy." "I'm a bartender," she rasped, pulling her arm back. "I just fill in where the money is." Volkov stared at her for a second longer. Sophia held her breath. If he recognized her eyes, "Let her go, Victor," Frankie said, annoyed. "We have numbers to discuss." Volkov released her. "Get out and bring more ice." Sophia turned and walked away. She didn't run. She walked with the measured, tired gait of a worker at the end of a shift. "I'm out," she whispered into the mic once she was clear of the VIP section. "Devices planted. Good girl," Dominic said. "Now get to the exit. We have the audio. We have the confession. We can—" Suddenly the music in the club cut out. The lights slammed on, blindingly bright white. "Ladies and gentlemen," a voice boomed over the PA system. It was Volkov. Sophia stopped near the kitchen doors. "We have a slight security breach," Volkov's voice echoed, sounding amused. "It seems we have a spy in our midst, a little bird who likes to listen." Sophia's blood ran cold. She reached under the table. No, he couldn't have found it that fast. "Lock the doors," Volkov ordered. The heavy steel exit doors slammed shut with a magnetic clang. "Dominic," Sophia whispered. "They locked the doors." "I know," Dominic yelled, the sound of an engine revving in the background. "They jammed the signal. They found the bug immediately. It was a trap, Sophia. They knew you were coming." "No." Sophia looked back at the VIP booth. Frankie was standing there, looking down at the floor of the club with a look of pity. Volkov was smiling, scanning the terrified crowd of partygoers. "We are looking for a woman," Volkov announced. "She has blonde hair. She is dressed as staff. Bring her to me, and you all go home. Hide her, and I burn this place down with everyone inside." Every head in the club turned. Hundreds of eyes scanned the room. Sophia backed into the kitchen, her heart pounding so hard she thought it would burst. She was trapped, a blonde in a staff uniform in a room full of people desperate to survive. "Dominic," she said, her voice breaking. "I'm trapped in the kitchen. Listen to me." Dominic's voice was a growl of pure violence. "Stay away from the door. Get down." "Why?" "Because," Dominic said, "I'm not using the door." Crash! The entire back wall of the onyx room exploded inward. Sophia hit the floor, covering her head as debris rained down. A massive black delivery truck had just reversed at full speed through the loading bay doors, smashing through the brick and drywall, crushing the kitchen equipment. The truck ground to a halt amidst a cloud of dust and plaster. The back doors of the truck flew open. Dominic Moretti stepped out. He wasn't wearing a suit, he was wearing a tactical vest over his bandaged chest, and in his hands was an M4 carbine. He stepped over the rubble, his eyes scanning the dust-filled kitchen until they found Sophia. "I told you," he said, racking the slide of the rifle. "I don't trust the staff entrance." The kitchen was a whiteout of drywall dust and pulverized brick. The delivery truck, a stolen bakery van plated with improvised steel, sat like a beast in the wreckage of the commercial ovens. Dominic grabbed Sophia, pulling her behind the engine block of the truck, just as the kitchen doors disintegrated under a hail of submachine gun fire. "Can you shoot?" Dominic roared over the noise, pressing a heavy Glock 19 into her hands. "I've never fired a gun in my life," Sophia screamed, her hands shaking as she gripped the cold polymer. "Point and pull, don't hit me." Dominic leaned out from behind the truck, the M4 carbine barking in controlled bursts. Two of Volkov's men, who had foolishly rushed the breach, dropped to the tiled floor. "Dante!" Dominic yelled, "suppressing fire!" From the driver's seat of the smashed truck, Dante, bleeding through his sling, jammed a sawed-off shotgun through the shattered windshield and unleashed a roar of buckshot towards the swinging doors, buying them a second of silence. "We move now," Dominic commanded. He looked at Sophia. His face was streaked with dust and sweat, his eyes wild. "Stay on my hip. If I drop, you leave me and you run for the truck. Do not look back." "I'm not leaving you," she said, flicking the safety off the Glock, mimicking what she'd seen him do. Dominic gave her a look that was half terrified, half proud. "Then let's go take back the city." They moved. They burst from the kitchen into the main club floor. The scene was pandemonium. The civilian crowd was stampeding toward the emergency exits, creating a human shield of chaos. "Clear the floor!" Dominic bellowed, firing into the ceiling. The crowd scattered to the edges, leaving the center dance floor open. On the VIP balcony, Viktor Volkov stood like an emperor, his face twisted in rage. He pointed down at them. "Kill them! All of them!" 3 Russian mercenaries rappelled from the balcony railing, firing as they descended. Dominic shoved Sophia behind a marble pillar and returned fire. He caught one mercenary in mid-air. The man went limp, tangling in his rope. But the other 2 landed, taking cover behind the bar. Bullets chipped away the marble inches from Sophia's face. She squeezed her eyes shut, raised the gun around the side of the pillar, and pulled the trigger blindly. The recoil nearly broke her wrist. "Lower!" Dominic yelled, changing magazines with fluid precision. "You're shooting the ceiling lights." Dominic broke cover, sliding across the alcohol-slicked floor to a heavy velvet sofa. He took out the second mercenary with a double tap to the chest. But he was slowing down. The stitches in his chest had torn. A dark stain was spreading across his tactical vest. "Dominic!" Sophia screamed as the third mercenary flanked him. Dominic turned too late. The Russian raised his weapon. Bang! The Russian's head snapped back and he collapsed. Dominic froze, looking around. He hadn't fired. He looked at Sophia. She was standing in the open, the Glock held in both hands, smoke drifting from the barrel. She was hyperventilating, her eyes wide with shock. She had taken the shot. "Nice aim," Dominic wheezed, struggling to his feet. They were the only ones left standing on the dance floor. The music had stopped. The only sound was the distant sirens and the heavy breathing of the survivors. Slowly, slow clapping echoed from the balcony. Frankie the Saint Giordano stood at the railing, next to Volkov. Frankie looked sad, like a disappointed father. "You always were hard to kill, Dom," Frankie called down. "Just like your old man. Stubborn." "Come down here, Frankie," Dominic shouted, his voice echoing in the cavernous room. Look me in the eye and tell me why you sold us out. Progress, Dominic, Frankie yelled back, his composure cracking. The old ways are dead. Honor doesn't pay the bills. Volkov offered us the ports, the unions, everything. All we had to do was get rid of the boy king who wouldn't play dirty. Volkov, impatient with the monologue, shoved Frankie aside. He raised a gold-plated desert eagle. Enough talk. Goodbye, Mr. Moretti. Volkov aimed at Dominic's exposed chest. Dominic raised his rifle, but it clicked empty. He reached for his sidearm. Too slow. Sophia saw it happen in slow motion. She saw the glint of gold on the balcony. She saw Dominic's magazine fall empty. She didn't shoot. She ran. She sprinted from the cover of the pillar and tackled Dominic, slamming her shoulder into his wounded chest, knocking him flat just as the thunderous boom of the Desert Eagle tore through the air. The bullet missed Dominic's heart by inches, burying itself in the floor where he had been standing. "You stupid girl," Volkov roared, aiming again at the tangle of bodies on the floor. But the distraction had bought enough time. From the shattered kitchen entrance, Dante emerged. He didn't have a gun. He had the truck's flare gun. He fired. The red flare arched through the smoky air, hissing like a demon. It didn't hit Volkov. It hit the heavy velvet drapes hanging directly behind him on the balcony. The old dust-filled fabric caught fire instantly. The flames roared up the wall, engulfing the VIP booth in seconds. The fire suppression system, which Sophia had learned about the hard way, had been disabled by Volkov's own men to allow them to smoke cigars. Volkov screamed as the heat drove him back. He stumbled, blinded by the sudden inferno, and toppled over the balcony railing. He fell 20 feet, crashing onto the glass bar below. He didn't move. On the balcony, Frankie was trapped by the wall of fire. He looked down at Dominic and Sophia. He looked at the exit, blocked by flames. He looked at Dominic one last time. He didn't beg. He simply buttoned his suit jacket, straightened his tie, and stepped back into the fire. The saint burned with his sins. The new order. 3 months later, the private room at Ristorante da Vinci was quiet. The repairs were finished, the bullet holes patched, the mirrors replaced. Marco, the maitre d', approached table 4 with trembling hands. He placed a bottle of 1982 Brunello on the table. "For you, boss," Marco whispered, "and for the signora." Dominic Moretti sat in his usual chair. He looked different. The scar on his cheek had faded, but the hardness in his eyes remained. He poured the wine himself. Across from him sat Sophia. She wasn't wearing an apron. She was wearing a tailored black dress that screamed power. A diamond tennis bracelet, a gift for services rendered, glittered on her wrist. She didn't look like a waitress. She looked like the woman who owned the place, because she did. Dominic had bought the deed and put it in her name the day after the fire. "To loyalty," Dominic said, raising his glass. Sophia picked up her glass. She swirled the red liquid, checking it out of habit. She smiled, a sharp, knowing smile that made Marco nervous. "To knowing who to trust," she corrected. They clinked glasses. The door to the restaurant opened. A young man in a cheap suit walked in, looking nervous. He was a messenger from the Chicago outfit. He approached the table, sweating. "Mr. Moretti," the kid stammered. "The boss is in Chicago. They want to know if the rumors are true. They heard you have a new consigliere. Someone outside the families. Someone dangerous." Dominic leaned back, resting his hand over Sophia's on the table. He looked at the woman who had switched the glass, jumped onto a ledge, stitched up his chest, and charged into gunfire for him. "Tell Chicago the rumors are true," Dominic said, his eyes locked on Sophia, "and tell them if they ever try to cross me, they won't have to deal with me." He smirked. "They'll have to deal with her." Sophia took a sip of her wine, her eyes cold and calm over the rim of the glass. "Run along now," she told the messenger softly. "We're eating." The kid ran. Dominic watched him go, then turned back to his wife. "You scared him." "Good," Sophia said, cutting her steak. I'm just getting started. What a ride! From a trembling waitress holding a poisoned glass to the queen of the New York underworld, Sophia Russo proves that sometimes the most dangerous person in the room isn't the one holding the gun. It's the one serving the drinks. This story highlights how thin the line is between victim and victor. Dominic and Sophia's bond wasn't built on flowers and dates. It was forged in fire, betrayal, and blood. It makes you wonder, if you were in Sophia's shoes, standing at that table with the cyanide in your hand, would you have looked the other way? Or would you have risked everything to save a monster? If you enjoyed this mafia romance saga, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a story. And let me know in the comments, should Sophia have taken over the family herself? Thanks for watching,